Ms. Gallant?
Good evening. My name is Maya Gallant, and I am first and foremost a Baltimore City resident, and I am going to summarize my educational experience within 3 minutes. I started out at a Baltimore City public school for elementary, and it was an amazing experience because it was a part of my community. And at the age of, or in third grade, I was in a program in my school where we would go to the kindergarten class and read a book to them. As a third grader, I sat down with this kindergartner and couldn't read a single word. The kindergartner actually mainly read the book to me. And that was really when I, as a student, realized that I was falling behind. My parents, because of my grandmother's background in education, recognized that I had dyslexia. So it was at that point where I was pulled from Baltimore City schools and put into a private institution that was meant for dyslexia. This was extremely hard at such a young age because it taught me that a good education was going to cost me. I wasn't going to be able to get the resources I needed at a public school level. And that really changed the way I thought of education. And so I would like to stress the importance that many students, unlike me, were not helped. I know many students to this day that I try and help currently that are undiagnosed with dyslexia or other learning disabilities, and they do not receive the accommodations that I do. And I, as a senior in high school, try and advocate them where they should be being advocated for in the school system. There are no counselors that can help them. There are no counselors to advocate for them. Their parents may not know, but it is not their fault, and they are being left behind because of it. And so I would just like to emphasize the importance that no child should be left behind. Not saying that they need to be pushed through the grades, because that is what happens. They need to be looked at individually, not labeled as problem students, not labeled as students who just don't get it, because that's what happens. I was labeled as a student who didn't get it. Many of my peers are labeled, and that is something that holds back students. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Anaya Owens, and I'm a junior at Bard High School Early College in Baltimore City. I am a student and an advocate and organizer with the Baltimore intersection. Many residents of Maryland associate Baltimore City with its reputation of violence, and I don't blame them. Baltimore's record high homicide rate in 2018 is the reason I also tend to believe violence is the root of our climate. And it is, but not homicidal violence. I'm here to talk about a violence that is not physical. It has been the root of destruction to Black neighborhoods and schools included for decades. Redlining is violence. Segregation is violence. Mass incarceration is violence. Gentrification is violence. But most importantly, the continuous underfunding of Baltimore City schools is the worst, most violent crime committed against our youth. A journalist in liberal intelligence magazine, The American Prospect, states, "Today, Baltimore is one of the most segregated cities in the nation, where Black residents make up the majority of the population but do worse than the average Black American and far worse than the average white Baltimore resident on almost every measure of general well-being." Do not forget that these are realities that have been created not by Baltimore City residents, but those in position of power. Today, we call on those of you in those positions to be intentional about how you ensure the violence no longer continues. Here are specific needs I would like to draw your attention to in regard to the Kirwan Commission focus on at-risk support. In schools, we need more counselors in every single grade to address the traumas that hinder city students' abilities to perform with high academic achievement. But support in school buildings alone is not enough when students return to a community that lacks the resources to create meaningful change. Investing in our education means investing in those who teach us most, our parents, our community leaders, and our families. This means providing the funding for Baltimore City community leaders to create programs to mentor and support our youth. I am here today as an advocate, but I am not the only voice of Baltimore City youth. I have the opportunity to be in the Baltimore intersection where we are supported in organizing and advocacy, but these are skills that every single young person in Baltimore City should have access to, as opposed to only students such as myself who come from middle-class, two-parent households. There are many important voices that deserve to be heard here today, but are not because they do not have the access to such programs. No one should have to fight for their voice to be heard simply because our city does not have adequate funding for programs that empower our own youth to be leaders and agents of change. If a group of students in Park Heights want to build a rec center, they should have immediate access to every single resource needed to make it happen. It shouldn't be that hard. If BPS students want to access to qualified psychologists, they should have every single resource needed to make it happen. It shouldn't be that hard. If students want to create a community-based program to provide families with fresh produce, they should have immediate access to every single resource. It shouldn't be that hard. When we talk about at-risk support, understand that when one entire city is underfunded and lacks access to meaningful programs and support outside of the four walls of a classroom, the entire state of Maryland is at risk of perpetuating inequity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.